Hello one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Now, whilst some of the sort of travel logistics for this trip have been a bit of a headache, one thing which hasn't been a headache is the hotels I've been staying in. Firstly, Souvretta House in St. Moritz, and now you find me in one of my favourite hotels in the world. It's the Four Seasons Geneva. I fell in love with this place last year during Drive the World, and I'm so glad they've welcomed me back because I honestly don't think I've ever experienced luxury or customer service like I have in this place. It's just mind-blowing. Anyway, a few weeks ago, you may have seen that I announced my hunt for a classic car is back on. Well, in fact, the hunt very nearly ended very quickly because I was actually bidding on a beautiful 1970s Alfa Romeo, but I got outbid and then the car went out of my budget. Anyway, turns out someone here in Geneva has been watching all of this unfold and they got in touch, said, look, if you are considering an Italian classic car, you need to think about Lancia. And it turns out I have quite an interesting Lancia. You should probably come and check out to introduce yourself to the brand. Well, what is that interesting Lancia this guy has? Only a 037. I mean, honestly, if you don't know what that is, you've probably heard of the Stratos and probably the Delta Integrale. Well, the 037 is kind of like sometimes the unloved or maybe the forgotten middle child. But it's an exceptionally important car because to appreciate Lancia, you need to understand what they did in the world of rallying. And back in the sort of Group B era, the iconic Group B era, the 037 was Lancia's entry, and in fact, it was the last ever rear-wheel drive car to win a rally championship. I mean, Walter Röhrl, who was the driver and is of course one of the most iconic rally drivers ever, said it's the best handling car he's ever driven. Now, because of Group B regulations, Lancia had to make 200 homologated road-going versions. So some lucky people out there essentially could go and buy a slightly diluted version of a championship-winning rally car. So yes, I kind of worry that maybe I'm going to keep test driving classic cars that are way out of my budget, but here's my thought process. If I try the best from different eras and different manufacturers, that will kind of help me figure out what I want, and then I can whittle it down to cheaper, more affordable versions that I can maybe then build up to be somewhere near as special as the originals. Does that make sense? I'm not sure it does, but anyway, who cares? I'm going to finish my coffee and enjoy these next 5 minutes in this insane hotel room, and then we're going to go and find this quite incredible and very rare Lancia. Well, here it is, the iconic, and yes, I'm going to call it iconic, even though I said it's sometimes forgotten, Lancia 037. And I have to say, the first thing I thought when I saw this car is how small it is. It's got amazing presence, mainly because of that quite ridiculous rear wing. And I don't know if you can call it a rear wing as much as a ducktail spoiler or just, well, a vertical wall at the back of the car. But yeah, it's just small and petite, but also mean and angled. One of the things I love about the 037 is it's a kind of culmination of many iconic Italian names. Of course, Lancia being the badge on the front, but it's also a sort of collaboration with Abarth. It uses a sort of variation of the engine that was in the Fiat Abarth 131 rally car, a car that I kind of fell in love with the idea of after driving a Lada rally car in Bulgaria last year. Whilst it definitely wasn't anything close to a Fiat Abarth 131 rally car, it was a similar kind of body shape, and I just got really carried away by the idea of a 131. Anyway, I'm getting distracted because this car was also designed by Pininfarina, which is probably why I love the looks of it so much. But to me, it doesn't really look like a rally car. It looks more like a mid-engined supercar. It also, I think, looks quite modern. A lot of this car was brand new for the purposes of going rallying. They kind of kept like a bit of the central cabin from a Lancia Monte Carlo, not a much loved car, but pretty much everything else was redesigned, purpose-built for rallying. Some other sort of little features that I like, which we'll talk about more once we take the car to a slightly more picturesque location, the bubble roof, a quite iconic thing from Abarth at the time. But anyway, here we are at DriveVintage, the incredible people who've invited me down here today to check out this quite stunning car. I bang on about Windrush all the time, you know that's where I keep my 360. These guys are like Windrush on speed. It's essentially the ultimate car concierge service based here in Geneva. So yes, huge thanks to them for this opportunity. I reckon let's start this car up and head to some pretty amazing local roads. really sure I ever expected to find myself in a Lancia 037. I know at the beginning I mentioned, you know, oh well, maybe I should try the best classic cars ever made and then buy cheaper versions and make them better, but I could never buy a cheaper version of this because it doesn't exist. It was only made for Group B and then these 200 homologation specials. And this thing, it doesn't necessarily feel like a road car, it feels inherently motorsport. It also feels very Italian in the sense that that huge wing, ducktail spoiler, whatever you want to call it, takes up the entire view through my rear view mirror. I mean, my rear view mirror is pointless because all I see is that sort of wing. So little things like this, it's just very Italian because this is functional when needed for the downforce. We don't care about what's behind us, you look in front of you, you overtake. I have to say, the thing picks up and goes. 2-litre, 4-cylinder this thing with a supercharger. So Group B regulations at the time basically allowed for 3-litre engines. A lot of people went the turbocharged route, but Lancia thought they wanted a supercharger to avoid any kind of turbo lag. And there's me not keeping the revs high enough. Like any kind of, well, slightly older car, but also motorsport bred car, you need to kind of rev the thing out. You need to keep it alive, keep it going. And this thing does kind of beckon you to push on. We're talking under 300 horsepower, of course. This is the early 80s that this car was developed, but it's only around, well, less than 1,200 kilos, so the thing is light. No power steering, obviously, and as I mentioned, and as is so important, rear-wheel drive. Because at the time, four-wheel drive was dominating rally. Obviously, Audi and the Quattro turned up, and sadly, the year that this thing won the Constructors' Championship, actually Audi won the Drivers' Championship. But yeah, Quattro was the big deal, and after this car won in 1983, a rear-wheel drive car never won a rally championship again. So this thing really does stand out, and yeah, out here now, here we go. I mean, we are moving now, we are moving. 5-speed ZF gearbox, and it does still feel pretty planted on the road. It's sort of agile, but solid. You know, a lot of these older cars can feel a bit flimsy. You can a little bit hear the supercharger there. We've got all the windows down because it's hot today, and of course, no aircon in a car like this. But it's got immediate character, which is what I absolutely adore. To think of sort of hurtling this around an off-road rally circuit kind of blows my mind, but oh yeah, it wants to move. It wants to move. A huge amount of work was done to the suspension of this car to handle those off-road sections. Double wishbones, big old double shock absorbers as well. The thing actually rides the road really smoothly. We're obviously on Swiss tarmac roads, so it feels pretty sedate, but you kind of feel like you could handle some bumps, but I don't really want to. I kind of want to go and attack a circuit. There's a very big bus coming and we're in a very expensive car, so nearly ended up in the cornfield, but I did all right. I handled that pressure. Yeah, weirdly, when I experience Philips Stratos, another video that I've done on this channel, the thing was really brutal. It was, of course, an actual rally car. This is the Stradale, so the sort of street version, the homologation version, as I mentioned. So it is a bit more sedate, but that Stratos was just, it was tiny and cramped and obviously a bit more iconic, I suppose. This thing, definitely much more of a road car and road compliant, much nicer to be in. But I mentioned the fact it's kind of unloved or sometimes forgotten, just because it had a short life. Group B, let's not forget, was only around for, well, what, 5 years or so? And this thing, 1982, wasn't very successful. 1983 won the championship, and then had a bit of a slow decline as everything went Quattro. And then before you know it, the S4, the Delta, was along, and this thing was kind of, you know, in the bin. But Walter Röhrl, the driver at the time, as I think I might have mentioned, I'm not sure because I did a few takes of my intro, just as I try and figure out where to go, did say it was the best handling car he ever drove, and I can kind of understand why. That mid-engine setup, it's so small, the front wheels are just there, and you're surprised by how close the rear wheels are. But this is something that I could very happily do, for example, the Mille Miglia in, or the Tour Auto, because it just does feel surprisingly comfortable. One more push, as I imagine myself setting off on the Rallye de Genève. Here we go. I've parked the 037 up quickly next to the Evora because bizarrely, a lot of the kind of design characteristics or styling elements are really similar between these two cars. I mean, early 1980s and 2020, British car, Italian car, but don't you think they look a little bit similar? Even size-wise, they're a little bit similar. Weight, I mean, the Evora's probably, what, 100 kilos more than the Lancia, but look back here, that sort of ducktail I keep talking about, the Evora's got one as well. Kind of hilarious to see, but yeah, similar colours, similar setup. I just thought, as I pulled in, weird how similar they are. But of course, very different to drive. An amazing experience getting behind the wheel of a 037. I am hugely grateful to DriveVintage. Now, I think, you know, it has opened my eyes a little bit to the idea of a Lancia, but of course something like that, definitely not in my budget. We'd be looking more at sort of Fulvias, which kind of preceded the 037, and then maybe Deltas. They're quite a lot now. You can find really dodgy versions and do them up, but weirdly, I'm not kind of into the hatchback scene. I do like the idea of Fulvia. Maybe that's what I need to check out next. And they did some really nice kind of rally versions which were pretty good looking as well. But yeah, that has definitely opened my eyes and sort of pushed me away from maybe the German things towards the Italian things. But then things like the corduroy seats, that completely pointless rearview mirror, the huge ashtray, just the Italian elements makes you think, could I live with that? I mean, living with the 360 at times can be difficult. Do I really want to sign up to living with an even older Italian car? Maybe not. Anyway, as I say, once again, big thanks to DriveVintage. If you want to check out their Instagram, I'll put a link below. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts. When I eventually find the classic car, do you want it to be Italian? Do you want it to be German? Do you want it to be British? What are your thoughts? Make sure to stay subscribed for plenty more videos to come.